Hey there, welcome to Night Lectures, your daily dose of fascinating stories. He was born into a noble family, yet he never dreamed of power. He did not crave fame, yet he became one of the most revered emperors of Rome. He ruled in the shadow of plague, rebellions, and endless wars. And every night he wrote in his notebook, "Be patient, be just, be human." In this video, we will tell the story of Marcus Aurelius, emperor, philosopher, soldier, and father. You will learn how an ordinary young man became heir to the throne without a drop of ambition, why he was called the Philosopher-Emperor, and what he wrote in his meditations while sitting in a military camp, how he fought rebellions, plague, and his own doubts, and how his words, 2,000 years later, still help people cope with anxiety, pain, and chaos. This is not just the story of a ruler of ancient Rome. It is the story of a man who proved that to be strong means to remain honest. Share your ideas for future videos in the comments and hit the subscribe button. New bedtime stories come out here daily. In the spring of the year 121 of our era, in one of the most influential Roman families, a boy named Marcus Annius Catilius Severus was born. Later he would enter history as Marcus Aurelius, emperor, philosopher, and author of Meditations, a work that became a moral compass for generations. His birth in the capital of the empire promised much, yet his path to the throne was not predetermined. It began with early loss, strict education, and a search for meaning in philosophy. His father, Marcus Annius Verus, came from a senatorial dynasty and served as praetor. He died before his son turned 4. His widowed mother, Domitia Lucilla, came from a wealthy family that owned brick workshops, and she devoted herself to raising her child, though the main influence on young Marcus came from his paternal grandfather, Marcus Annius Verus the Elder, twice consul. It was he who provided his grandson with the education befitting a patrician and future statesman. From his earliest years, Marcus was serious and contemplative. He avoided childish amusements, preferring reflection, reading, and solitude. According to biographers, he voluntarily renounced comfort, wore simple clothes, and even slept on the floor until persuaded to use at least a hide. These traits, rare for a boy of his status, did not go unnoticed. Emperor Hadrian, a distant relative of Marcus on his mother's side, noticed him early. Even in childhood, he called him Verissimus, the most truthful. Admiring his gravity and restraint, Hadrian saw in him a potential successor. Yet because of Marcus's youth and lack of direct right to the throne, the emperor first chose Lucius Cionius Commodus as heir. Commodus soon died, and Hadrian made another move. He adopted the senator Antoninus Pius on the condition that Antoninus would, in turn, adopt Marcus Aurelius and young Lucius Verus, the son of the deceased heir. Thus Marcus became part of the imperial line of succession. But this was merely a political formality. His education continued. Hadrian ordered that Marcus receive the best tutors, and thus began his deep bond with philosophy. The first to awaken his interest in Stoicism was Diognetus, not a professional philosopher but a mentor who taught him simplicity, self-control, and inner discipline. Diognetus introduced the boy to Greek culture and trained his mind toward contemplation and a Spartan way of life. Then Marcus studied under several great rhetoricians and philosophers. Alexander of Caudyaeum taught him logic and reasoning, laying the foundation for his critical thinking. But the strongest influence came from the Stoic Quintus Junius Rusticus, a teacher who embodied virtue, modesty, and strength of spirit. Rusticus advised Marcus to read the works of Epictetus, a moment that became decisive in his spiritual formation. Another mentor was Fronto, master of Latin rhetoric and defender of old Roman virtues. Their correspondence, preserved to this day, reveals an affectionate and profound bond. They discussed not only language and style, but also morality, politics, and human weakness. Fronto disapproved of his students' devotion to Stoicism, finding it too austere, yet Marcus had already chosen philosophy as his path in life. He formed his identity not through ambition, but through constant dialogue with himself. Even as a youth, he began writing the notes that would later become his Meditations. These writings were not meant for others, but for inner discipline, a means to remain honest, control emotions, and confront fear and temptation. Marcus also received a broad education in law, history, literature, and the religious and civic traditions of Rome. He attended Senate meetings, fulfilled priestly duties, and early on participated in administration. Despite his youth, he impressed elders with his maturity and sense of responsibility. His childhood and youth were marked by duality, wealth and privilege on one side, simplicity and introspection on the other. He saw luxury, yet rejected it. He understood power, yet did not seek it. He learned from philosophers, yet began to search for answers not in books, but within his own heart. By the time he reached adulthood, he had already developed a rare character, restrained, disciplined, and compassionate. These qualities would later form the foundation of his reign, a reign in which philosophy and power would merge in one man. At the beginning of the 130s, young Marcus Annius Catilius Severus, the future Marcus Aurelius, had already gained a reputation as an intelligent, serious, and disciplined youth. His inclination towards solitude and reflection surprised even those accustomed to the glitter of Roman aristocracy. His demeanor expressed not shyness, but inner composure, the result of both upbringing and natural self-discipline. Emperor Hadrian, a distant relative, followed his progress closely. By the year 136, sensing his approaching death, Hadrian adopted Lucius Caionius Commodus, an unremarkable senator, as heir. The choice puzzled many, for Commodus lacked both virtue and ability. But Hadrian likely sought to secure a succession chain. To strengthen the decision, he gave Commodus the title of consul and the name Lucius Aelius Caesar. Fate intervened. In January of the year 138, Commodus fell ill and died. With little time left, Hadrian adopted Titus Aurelius Antoninus, a man of integrity, patience, and loyalty to tradition, on the condition that Antoninus would adopt 15-year-old Marcus and 7-year-old Lucius Verus, the late Commodus' son. Thus Marcus entered the imperial line by law. When Hadrian died in July of that same year, Antoninus, now known as Antoninus Pius, ascended the throne, and Marcus, taking the name Marcus Aurelius Antoninus, became Caesar and official heir. His youth was over. A long period of preparation began. For the next 23 years, he would live beside Antoninus, observing governance, studying administration, and perfecting himself, yet never exceeding the boundaries set by his adoptive father. Antoninus Pius proved a rare ruler, peaceful, fair, lawful, and patient. For more than 2 decades, the empire knew no major wars. Stability and prosperity flourished. In this tranquil climate, Marcus matured both as thinker and as future ruler. Antoninus encouraged his philosophical pursuits. Quintus Junius Rusticus remained his stoic guide, teaching him to live according to reason and duty. With Rusticus, he discussed the balance between justice and firmness, tolerance and responsibility. Another teacher, Fronto, remained his rhetorical mentor and close friend. Their letters reveal discussions about morality, family, and the frailty of human nature. Though Fronto disapproved of Stoicism, he respected Marcus's character and intellect. During these years, Marcus began his political career. At 16, he became quaestor. At 20, consul. These offices, part of the cursus honorum, served less as ambition than as training. He listened to provincial reports, participated in Senate debates, and learned to balance law and compassion. Around this time, he married Annia Galeria Faustina the Younger, daughter of Antoninus Pius. Their marriage had dynastic importance, but also affection. They had 13 children, though only a few survived, a tragedy Marcus endured with stoic calm. He especially worried for his son Commodus, who inherited his grandfather's name but not his virtues. For over 20 years, Marcus waited patiently for the throne. He continued to write, study Epictetus, and practice self-reflection. Chronic pain, headaches, and insomnia plagued him, yet he treated suffering as a discipline for the soul. Antoninus Pius ruled until his death in the year 161. He never hastened Marcus's rise nor gave him premature power, and perhaps that restraint prepared him best. Marcus did not crave rule. He simply lived ready for it. When Antoninus died, the Senate promptly confirmed Marcus as emperor. Yet his first act surprised everyone. He refused to rule alone, and insisted that power be shared with Lucius Verus, his adopted brother since childhood. It was the first formal co-rule in Roman history, an act of moderation, cooperation, and wisdom. On the night of the 6th to the 7th of March in the year 161, Emperor Antoninus Pius died at the Laurium Palace near Rome. His passing ended more than 20 years of peace and raised the question of succession. The Senate immediately confirmed Marcus Aurelius as emperor, recognizing his preparation, wisdom, and loyalty. Yet within days, Marcus took an unexpected step. He declared that he would share imperial authority with Lucius Verus, his adoptive brother. For the first time, Rome had 2 emperors, equal in title and power. Though Marcus, as Pontifex Maximus, held ceremonial precedence, he often placed his signature after Lucius's name, signaling equality. This was not weakness, but conviction. Marcus viewed power as service, not privilege. He knew Lucius's flaws, yet believed dual rule would strengthen unity and prevent civil discord. Soon came the first challenge. In Armenia, rebellion flared with Parthian support. The Parthians seized Artaxata and installed their own king, an affront to Roman honor. Marcus decided that Lucius Verus would lead the eastern campaign, accompanied by capable generals Avidius Cassius and Statius Priscus. Lucius lacked strategic skill, yet his presence symbolized imperial commitment. Meanwhile, Marcus remained in Rome, overseeing justice, welfare, and administration. One of his earliest reforms expanded the alimenta, state support for poor children and orphans. He supervised its finances personally and simplified laws on emancipation and guardianship. He also reformed judicial procedure, granting provincial judges more autonomy to speed up trials and reduce corruption. His surviving letters to governors reveal moral clarity. Serve not yourself, but the province betray that trust, and you lose not only my favor, but your own self-respect. Meanwhile, war costs strained the treasury. The Senate resisted new taxes, yet Marcus avoided repression. Even in judgment, he preferred mercy. At one hearing, seeing an accused man trembling, he said, "Fear is a poor adviser. If you are innocent, you need it not. If guilty, it comes too late." Despite outward calm, tension grew. Reports of abuses and unrest arrived daily. Marcus answered each petition himself, rising early, eating modestly, surrounded by secretaries and philosophers. His wife, Faustina, often joined public ceremonies. Their marriage, though debated, remained stable. Then came troubling news from the east. Returning soldiers carried a strange fever marked by rash and exhaustion, the plague later called the Antonine Plague. None yet grasped its scale. Traders and officers brought it back to Italy, carrying with them an unseen disaster. But that would come later. For now, Marcus ruled with thoughtfulness and restraint. He shunned triumphs and flattery, seeking only to fulfill duty, to preserve order, to be just, to remain true to himself. The beginning of his reign became a moment of rare harmony, between mind and power, between philosophy and governance. He did not treat the throne as a victory, but as a burden to be borne with dignity. And though wars, revolts, and losses awaited him, in those early years he still believed that reason and virtue could hold the world together. When Lucius Verus returned to Rome in the year 166, he was welcomed as a victor. The Parthian campaign, despite its difficult beginning, ended in success. The Roman legions restored control over Armenia, took the Parthian capital, Ctesiphon, and compelled King Vologases to accept peace. The Senate granted both emperors the titles Parthicus Maximus, and the city was adorned for a ceremonial entry. Yet the triumphal processions concealed the first in a series of tragedies. With the eastern armies there entered the empire a dangerous and unknown disease. The first outbreaks of the strange illness had been noticed already in the year 165 among troops stationed in Mesopotamia. The disease was accompanied by high fever, cough, rash, weakness, and mass mortality. It spread rapidly along roads and through camps, engulfing the provinces of Asia, Egypt, then Greece, and Italy. By the year 166, the illness had reached Rome. Panic seized the city. Hospitals were overflowing, priests offered sacrifices, physicians spread their hands in helplessness, and death seemed to hover over every quarter. Contemporaries, including the physician Galen, who observed the epidemic firsthand, recorded its symptoms and course. Today, scholars believe it may have been either smallpox or measles. The disease, later named the Antonine Plague, claimed by various estimates from 5 to 10 million lives. In Rome, according to the testimony of Cassius Dio, as many as 2,000 people died each day. Emperor Marcus Aurelius did not leave the city. He did not retreat to country villas, nor hide behind his guards. On the contrary, he continued to govern personally, coordinated grain supplies, organized aid for the poor, and allocated funds for the burial of the dead. He ordered part of the palace property to be sold, silver, luxury items, jewels, to cover a budget deficit brought on by sharply reduced tax revenues. He canceled the debts of provinces weakened by the epidemic and ordered the manumission of slaves left without masters. Parallel to the calamity in the capital, pressure mounted on the outer frontiers. The Germanic tribes dwelling beyond the Danube took advantage of the weakened Roman garrisons. From the late 160s began the incursions of the Marcomanni, Quadi, Sarmatians, and other peoples into Pannonia, Raetia, and Noricum. Some groups broke deep into imperial territory as far as northern Italy, threatening the very heart of the empire. It was the first time in many decades that an enemy had crossed the Alps. In the year 168, Marcus Aurelius, not waiting for new blows, personally set out for the Danube. Lucius Verus marched with him, as did members of the Senate, the Guard, engineers, and even the Empress, Faustina. The emperors inspected forts, strengthened crossings, and negotiated with local tribes. But at the beginning of the year 169, Lucius Verus suddenly fell ill and soon died at Altinum, now Vienna. The cause of death was likely the same plague that continued to reap both soldiers and city dwellers. The death of his co-ruler was a heavy blow for Marcus. He not only lost a political partner, but also assumed the full weight of power precisely when 3 disasters fell upon him at once: epidemic, barbarian invasions, and a financial crisis. Meanwhile, fighting on the Danube did not cease. Marcus reorganized the army and began recruiting, including among gladiators and slaves, promising them freedom for service. He mobilized veterans and created new legions. The operations were arduous. The enemy was numerous, knew the terrain well, and possessed hard-won combat experience. Marcus's troops fought under unbearable conditions, in marshes, forests, and under the constant threat of disease. Nevertheless, the Romans held the frontier, conducted punitive raids, and concluded temporary agreements. However, in the year 175, when it seemed that the northern tribes had been driven back and the initiative had returned to Rome, alarming news came from the east. In Egypt and Syria, Avidius Cassius proclaimed himself emperor. Cassius, an experienced commander, hero of the Parthian War and leader of the Eastern legions, raised a revolt on the strength of rumors of Marcus Aurelius's death. It appears the report was false and spread by chance. The eastern provinces, weary of instability, quickly swore allegiance to Cassius, fearing a vacuum of authority. Egypt, strategically vital because of its grain shipments, also recognized his power. When the news was confirmed in Marcus's camp on the Danube, the emperor kept his composure. He did not order an immediate offensive. Instead, he expressed the hope that the revolt could be quelled without bloodshed. His words reached the provinces, and already 3 months after the uprising began, Cassius was killed by his own legionaries. His head was sent to Marcus, but he refused to look upon it and ordered the remains to be buried. Moreover, he pardoned all of Cassius's supporters, including his children and family. He even forbade an inquest, saying he did not wish to multiply evil. Afterward, Marcus Aurelius went to the east to restore order in person. He visited Syria, Egypt, and Asia Minor. He held numerous meetings with city councils, provincial elites, and army commanders. He did not seek vengeance or stage show trials. His policy after the revolt was extremely restrained. He aimed to rebuild trust rather than to crush opposition. Then he returned to Italy, but only briefly. The north still burned. The Germanic peoples were not broken, and new tribes came to replace the defeated Marcus, again moved to the frontier. There, in the military camps along the Danube, in tents between battles, surrounded by soldiers, guards, and philosophers, he began to write down his thoughts, the very ones that would later enter his meditations. When Marcus Aurelius again found himself on the empire's northern frontier, he was already over 50. He had endured much: the deaths of loved ones, the plague, a revolt, the ceaseless anxieties of a ruler torn between duty and human weariness. His co-emperor Lucius Verus had died, Empress Faustina had passed away on the road, his own legates had raised arms against him, and external threats had not ceased for even a single year. Yet he continued to serve, not because he wanted power, nor from vanity, nor for glory, but because he regarded power as a burden to be carried while strength remained. It was then, on the frontier, on campaign, in camps and garrisons, that he began to record the thoughts later known as to himself, ta eis hauton, the work the world remembers as Meditations. He did not write a philosophical treatise. It was not a work for the public, nor an address to pupils or followers. His texts had no overarching structure, no chapter titles, no striving for completeness. They were brief notes, inner reminders, reflections, exhortations to himself, an attempt to preserve balance in conditions where it was all too easy to lose it. Written in Greek, as befit an educated man of the Hellenistic Roman world, they became a personal path towards steadiness, composure, and quiet of soul. By all indications, the greater part of these writings was composed during the First and Second Marcomannic Wars, between the years 170 and 180. The emperor's camp was at Carnuntum, a great Roman fortress on the territory of modern Austria. There, far from the capital, amid snows and marshes, he lived the life of a soldier. His tent stood beside the legionaries' quarters. He ate the same food as the officers, walked on foot, and in hours of rest withdrew to write in a notebook his observations, doubts, and spiritual exercises. These notes became his means of remaining human when everything around demanded hardness. He reminded himself that anger is weakness, that glory is fleeting, that death is not an evil, but the completion of a cycle. "Do not lose your head over those who will live 100 years from now," he wrote. "They will be as careless as the people of today." He knew the price of reputation and did not delude himself with it. He knew he would be forgotten and considered it natural. He trained himself not to rely on others, not to expect gratitude, not to demand justice, but to be just himself. On the pages of the Meditations, there is not a single mention of his own achievements, victories, or reforms. He does not recall the plague, the revolts, or even the name of his son, Commodus. He consciously refuses anything that could distract from the essential, from the effort to preserve dignity in a world full of fear, pain, and vanity. His philosophy was not speculative but profoundly practical. The stoicism to which he had inclined since youth became for him not a theory, but a way of life. Each day, facing rudeness, deceit, and selfishness, he urged himself, "Do not expect people to be otherwise." He wrote, "If you are outraged by evil, you have not yet understood the nature of the world." These notes were needed by him alone, like an anchor in a storm, like a mirror in which he checked whether he had changed for the worse. He was no hermit. He ruled, commanded, made decisions, and pronounced judgments. Yet even so, he strove not to become cruel. It is known that he opposed capital punishment where he could, and even after the revolt of Avidius Cassius, he did not punish the traitor's kin. One of his closest advisors, speaking of him, said, "He was gentle not from weakness, but from understanding how hard it is to be human." The soldiers respected him. Though a philosopher, he did not seem alien to them. He sat with them by the campfires, listened to complaints, and settled disputes. Once, When the legionaries complained about low pay, he did not punish them. Instead, he explained the state of the treasury, laid out the expenses, and then found a way to revise the distribution of funds. They did not fear him. They trusted him. At times in his notes, he addressed himself in the second person. You are not immortal. You cannot postpone. If not now, then when? He knew he was aging and nourished no illusions. He did not ask fate for ease. He asked only for clarity and firmness. Do what nature requires. Love what she gives. Depart when she calls. Later, after his death, these writings were gathered and published. Who did this is unknown. Perhaps a secretary, perhaps a friend. Marcus Aurelius himself never prepared them for publication. And yet, it was this book that became his chief monument. Not statues, not laws, not victories, but his words, quiet, restrained, piercingly honest. The Meditations of Marcus Aurelius are neither confession nor manifesto. They are an account rendered to himself. An emperor standing amid frost, amid soldiers, amid unending misfortunes, wrote not about his rights, not about a divine mission, but about how to remain a worthy human being even if everything is collapsing. And perhaps that is why his voice continues to be heard, across the centuries, through the dusk of empires, among people who also seek calm, justice, and meaning. When Marcus Aurelius became sole ruler after the death of Lucius Verus in the year 169, the empire was in a grave state. Wars blazed on the frontiers, the epidemic had weakened the populace and the army, and the financial system was under strain from constant military spending and emergency needs. Yet Marcus neither retreated nor resorted to cruelty or ostentatious luxury. His manner of rule remained as it had been during the co-regency, restrained, judicious, and directed toward the long term. For Marcus Aurelius, philosophy was not an abstract pursuit. It became an instrument of everyday choice, in private life and in matters of state. He did not regard his power as an exclusive right, but rather as an obligation laid upon him by fate, and he treated it with a seriousness born not of fear of losing it, but of the desire to use it worthily. One of the key directions of his rule was social protection. He continued and expanded the practice of alimenta, the state system supporting poor children and orphans. Under him, new funds and supervisory bodies were established to monitor their distribution. This assistance included allocations for food, clothing, and schooling, as well as the creation of conditions by which these children could later become free citizens and serve the state. He saw in them not a burden but the future strength of society. Marcus also worked consistently to improve the condition of slaves. Although he did not question the existence of slavery itself, as did most people of his time, he advocated a more humane approach. He limited an owner's ability to execute slaves arbitrarily, tightened penalties for cruel treatment, and simplified procedures for manumission. A freed person could count on the protection of the law rather than be cast helpless into society. Under Marcus Aurelius, the legal system became more orderly and accessible. He watched carefully over the conduct of proconsuls and governors, regularly received reports, and responded to abuses. He strove to make the courts serve justice rather than the interests of the powerful. There is a known case in which, upon receiving a complaint against the governor of the province of Asia, he not only ordered an investigation, but personally sent one of his legates with authority to remove local officials if violations were found. He regarded abuses of power not merely as private negligence, but as an undermining of trust in the entire imperial system. In religious policy, Marcus Aurelius remained faithful to traditional Roman cults. He regularly took part in rites, supported priestly colleges, and financed the construction and restoration of temples. For him, religion was less a matter of belief than a foundation of public order and moral upbringing. He did not unleash harsh criticism upon other religions, yet he required observance of the laws concerning veneration of the emperor and participation in official ceremonies. It was in this context that certain persecutions of Christians occurred during his reign. In particular, in the year 177 at Lugdunum, modern Lyon, a major execution of Christians took place, described in detail by early Christian sources. Although Marcus himself appears not to have issued edicts for universal persecution, he did not obstruct local authorities when they treated refusal to participate in the cults as an act of civic disobedience. His stance likely combined legal strictness with philosophical tolerance. He did not persecute faith as such, but could not ignore actions that, in his understanding, undermined public order. The army held a special place in his policy. After heavy losses from the epidemic and the Germanic wars, he reformed legion rosters, broadened recruitment, including among provincials, and strengthened reward programs. Veterans received land allotments, and settlements were founded for their families in new colonies. Thus, after victories on the Danubian frontier, towns were established where retired soldiers settled. They maintained ties to the army and served as living bridges between Rome and the peoples it had subdued. He enforced discipline in the army strictly, though not through fear, but through justice. It is recorded that during reviews of the legions he listened to soldiers' complaints personally. In one episode, after a thorough public examination with witnesses, he annulled the punishment of a centurion whom the legionaries had accused of injustice. He was respected not only for his authority, but also because he shared the hardships of campaign life with the army. He did not avoid privation, wore a simple cloak, ate the same food, and slept in a campaign tent like a common officer. In relations with the Senate, he preserved a distinctive style of rule. Although imperial authority had long since become absolute, Marcus did not abandon the consultative role of the Senate. He regularly brought the most important questions to debate: the appointment of governors, the distribution of taxes, the ratification of laws. He did not impose decisions, listened to objections, and sought consensus. According to contemporaries, he once publicly apologized to a senator whom he had interrupted during a session, acknowledging that he had no moral right to do so, despite his imperial title. In private life, he was strict with himself. After Faustina's death, he did not remarry and permitted himself no luxuries. He continued to keep notes and to reflect on virtue, the nature of power, the meaning of suffering, and the brevity of human life. His son Commodus troubled him. Already in adolescence, the boy showed a taste for games, cruelty, and ostentatious luxury. Nevertheless, Marcus did not deprive him of the right of succession, hoping that the influence of tutors and his own example would help the son to mature. He was not a reformer in the usual sense. He did not alter the structure of power, did not expand the borders, and did not launch grand projects. But he changed the spirit of governance itself, making it more moral, more humane, more transparent. He ruled in the shadow of Stoic principles, refusing to separate moral integrity from statecraft. He showed that philosophy and power need not stand on opposite sides. When asked what he would leave behind, he did not name buildings, laws, or victories. Everything he did was aimed not at remembrance, but at the fulfillment of duty. He believed that the meaning of power lies not in grandeur, but in service. And it was precisely this service, quiet, consistent, and unadvertised, that became his chief legacy. When Marcus Aurelius once more set out for the Danubian frontier, in the campaign of the year 178, he knew it might be his last war. He was already 58, his health worsening with each year, his former endurance fading, yet his inner resolve remained unchanged. He did not seek rest or privileges, and despite his age, he again took command of the army to finish what he considered the work of his life, to secure a durable peace on the empire's northeastern borders and to end the constant threat from the Germanic and Sarmatian peoples. After the suppression of Avidius Cassius's revolt in the year 175 and the completion of the eastern expedition, the emperor focused on the struggle against the Marcomanni, the Quadi, and the Iazyges. He strengthened frontier forts, reorganized garrisons, and began a series of offensive operations in which the Romans once again took positions beyond the Danube. Many tribes were forced to conclude agreements and give hostages, and some resettled within the empire as foederati, allies with limited rights, but an obligation to serve in the army. During this period, Marcus was seldom in Rome. Governance proceeded from camps such as Carnuntum and Vindobona, from field headquarters where he personally oversaw the movement of legions, negotiated with chieftains, and received dispatches from the capital. He wrote less in his journal now, but he still kept a strict routine, taking part in councils each day, studying reports, and attending to the needs of the soldiers. The troops saw in him not only a commander but a father, one who did not withdraw to private quarters or hide behind tribunes, but shared with them the cold, the damp, and the fatigue. In the year 175, Faustina, his wife and the mother of his many children, died. Despite the contradictory rumors that surrounded her private life, Marcus remained faithful to her to the end and deeply mourned her death. He deified her memory by a decision of the Senate and founded in her honor a settlement in central Syria, the colony of the divine Faustina. After her death, he did not remarry, devoting himself entirely to governance and the preparation of his heir. In the year 177, he formally proclaimed Commodus Augustus, making him co-ruler. The youth had turned 16, and despite his obvious unreadiness for statecraft, the emperor hoped that participation in the war and proximity to real affairs of state would influence his character. They went to the front together, and Marcus began gradually introducing Commodus to affairs, entrusting him with secondary decisions, observing his reactions, and teaching by personal example. Yet Commodus increasingly displayed a taste for theatricality, pleasures, and personal comfort. He joined hunts, delighted in military spectacles, and showed little interest in politics or philosophy. Marcus, despite inner misgivings, did not remove him from power. He believed that love and mentorship could change a young temperament, and hoped that after his death, his son would not destroy what had been built over years. In the winter of the years 179 to 180, the war continued. Roman forces achieved successes, but resistance from the barbarians remained stubborn. In early March of the year 180, while encamped near Vindobona, the modern city of Vienna, Marcus Aurelius felt a sharp decline in his condition. He suffered from fever, exhaustion, and possibly an aggravation of the chronic stomach illness that had tormented him since youth. Contemporaries, in particular Cassius Dio, described his last days as calm and free of complaint. He continued to give orders, receive messengers, and prepare his son for the transfer of power. He held no farewell ceremony, summoned no senators, and wrote no political testament. All that he could do, he had done. All he wished to say, he had long since written. In his meditations, he died on the 17th of March, in the year 180, in the arms of his intimates far from Rome, among soldiers and secretaries, in a tent rather than a palace. His body was embalmed and sent to Rome, where it was honorably cremated and the ashes placed in the mausoleum of Hadrian, the resting place of emperors. The Senate recognized him as divine and decreed that statues and memorials be erected to him. The most famous is the bronze equestrian statue that has survived to this day, outliving centuries, wars, and the fall of the empire. The barbarians did not melt it down, nor did Christians destroy it, because for a long time it was believed to depict a saint. This mistake saved the last imperial statue of its kind. And perhaps there is something symbolic in that. With his death there ended an era later called by historians the Golden Age of Rome, or the era of the 5 good emperors. From Nerva to Marcus Aurelius Commodus, his son, inherited the throne, but not the character. The reign of Commodus would mark the beginning of a new era, one of instability, violence, and decline. But that would be another story. For his contemporaries, the death of Marcus Aurelius was a true loss, not only because he was a just and prudent ruler, but because he was living proof that philosophy can dwell not merely in books, but in deeds. That power does not necessarily corrupt, that a person can remain himself even at the summit. He departed quietly, as he had lived, without triumphs, without sensation, without clamor. Yet he remained in history as one of the few of whom it could be said, he was great because he did not strive to seem great. With the passing of Marcus Aurelius in March of the year 180, there ended not merely the life of one of Rome's most outstanding rulers, but an entire epoch in which power could coexist with philosophy, politics with moral self-command, and the burden of empire with inner honesty. He was the last of the so-called 5 good emperors, yet the memory of him outlived not only his successors but the very state he had led. His name did not fade into a list of rulers. It remained in the role of exemplars. The political legacy of Marcus Aurelius is not a matter of grand reforms or the conquest of new territories. He did not create new institutions, rewrite the laws, or impose a cult of personality. Yet amid a crumbling balance, constant wars, and internal tensions, he managed to preserve order by acting gently, consistently, and with reliance on personal authority. His style of governance became a rare example of power, grounded not in fear and compulsion, but in respect, moderation, and self-discipline. He did not seek fame, yet he received it. He did not impose philosophy on his subjects, yet he himself embodied its chief principles. The way he faced illness, the deaths of loved ones, revolts, and the cruelty of his time left the memory of a man who could keep inner clarity even when the whole world reeled beneath his feet. His greatest influence came through his meditations, written in the last years of his life, mostly in military camps. These texts, originally not intended for publication, proved universal. They contain no references to political realities, almost no names, scarcely any mention of the author as a ruler. There is only a human being striving to live according to reason, courage, justice, and moderation. The fate of the book is remarkable. It survived through copyists and beginning in late antiquity, grew in significance with each century. In the Renaissance, it was read by humanists. In the 18th century, philosophers of the Enlightenment saw in Marcus the image of the ideal enlightened monarch. Thomas Jefferson kept the Meditations on his desk beside the Bible and the treatises of Locke. Kant, Fichte, Schopenhauer, and Nietzsche acknowledged his moral authority. He was not a scholar, yet he became a mentor. He was not a saint, yet he became a moral compass. In the 20th century, amid global upheavals and catastrophes, the stoicism of Marcus regained special force. Soldiers read him in the trenches of the First World War, political prisoners in jails, physicians in hospitals, and philosophers in exile. His ideas contributed to several currents in modern psychology, from cognitive behavioral therapy to practices of self-regulation and crisis thinking. He became a symbol of personal resilience, not aggressive or ostentatious, but calm and lucid, the kind that helps one not to give up even when everything is falling apart. In the 21st century, the Meditations continue to be republished and retranslated. People read them not for knowledge of history, but for inner support. They do not teach success, promise rewards, or offer quick solutions. They remind us that every person, even an emperor, daily encounters the temptations of fear, anger, resentment, laziness, and vanity, and that the only way to overcome them is conscious, unceasing work on oneself. The image of Marcus Aurelius is not that of a flawless ruler, nor the myth of a perfect man. It is the image of one who, having every opportunity to be cruel, weak, or self-satisfied, chose the path of dignity. He did not flee from power, yet he did not surrender to it. He did not renounce the world, yet he did not dissolve into it. He left to posterity, not marble arches and not legends of victories, but simple words written in a campaign tent. Let everything you say and do be as simple as that of a man, ready to leave life now. In Rome, his bronze statue still stands. He sits on horseback with his hand outstretched. Without weapon, without crown, without triumph, he does not command. He seems to invite. Live worthily. That perhaps is the truest metaphor for his legacy. He did not seek immortality, yet he remained in memory. He did not strive to teach, yet he became a teacher. He did not fight for eternal glory, yet he became an example that in power itself, when joined to reason and honor, there can still be something human.